Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to start assembling the right side of our motor. We're going to be putting in our counterbalancer, our crankshaft drive gears, our clutch basket, our kicker assembly. We're putting the shift drum shifter back in, the shift lever, and getting all the pieces back on the right side of the engine. We have everything laid out here. And what we are going to start with is going to be our kicker assembly. So on the kicker assembly, something to note is if you look at the top of the assembly, you'll see that there is a dot on the end of the kicker assembly. And there's also a dot on the toothed piece here. Those are, let me see if I can get this in a good light, to be lined up. So you just slide them down and line them right up. And then the next thing that'll go on will be the spring and the cap. Put the spring and cap in place like that. Then this spring gets put in and locks into, there's a hole on the shaft. Then the split washer goes in like that. Okay, so we've got the kicker assembly together, got the split washer in place. You can see, as you can see, it sits, it straddles the locking piece of the spring that goes into the shaft here. So we're going to line this up, drop this into place. Spin this around. Get that spring locked in, spin this, and push that down just like so. Now that is locked in. Next step is to put our locking plate in. The little tab goes up like so. Okay, we're going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on the two bolts that go in, and then put them in and snug them up. Okay, now those are installed. Right there. Okay, next step is I'm going to put the Kickstarter gear on. It just slides right onto there. I put a little lube on the shaft there, and then next thing is going to be our spacer. This is not an OEM spacer. This is an aftermarket spacer from BTD Motorsports. Just because I did not have the OEM spacer. Next, we're going to install our counterbalancer. I got my counterbalancer back. Had sent this out to BTD Motorsports to have them rebuild it, put a new bearing on it, and they time it and make sure that it is timed correctly. So I'm just going to add a little lube on the end here. I'm going to put a little assembly lube into the bearing, and then we're going to drop that into place. Okay, we got lube on there. We are going to drop this into place, and we're going to be aligning this hole toward the back of the motor so that this will slide into place. And there we go. Our counterbalancer dropped right into the bearing there. That spins nice. With the counterbalancer in, we are going to put the counterbalancer retaining plate in. And brand new OEM bolts for holding the retainer in. I am going to put a small dab of blue Loctite on these and then put them in and snug them into place. Okay, so next step is we're going to install our crank drive gear here, but we have to time everything. Now, if you look right here, there's a little dot which will line up with the scribe mark. It would be a dot on an OEM crankshaft, but on an aftermarket crankshaft, it's going to usually a scribe like that. And then there is a dot on the counterbalancer. I think you can just make it out right there. That is going to line up with the dot here. So first thing we'll do is line that timing mark up with the scribe mark. Then we're going to rotate our crankshaft Get the light so you can see here, so that our timing marks line up. And there we are. Timing mark on the drive gear is lined up with the scribe. Timing marks here between the counterbalancer and the drive gear are lined up. So now we are in time. I am going to just slide this off real quick, but something I forgot to mention is there is a spacer collar that goes in here that's underneath. I had installed that the other day, put some grease on it. That you'll see that there is a large gap between this seal and the crank. The spacer goes in there. You want to make sure you get that installed. So let's get this back lined up. Fortunately, nothing moved there, and we are lined up. Perfect. All right, next step is to put the crank drive gear that drives the clutch basket in place, and I did discuss this in my clutch basket video. As you can see here, you can see the wear marks on this where it rode on this ring gear. You can see that there's not enough clearance in this basket for the teeth, and Hinson has a note in their instructions that you need to just not use a grinder, or I guess if you had a machine shop and wanted to use a lathe, you could, but you got to just take the corners off of these outside teeth. So we're going to do that real quick, and that will eliminate because otherwise you're going to chew up the inside edge here and get a lot of metal in your oil. I guess this would be considered a thick style gear. From what I understand, there was a thin style gear that does not have that interference issue. But I guess the earlier 250Rs had the thick style. So we're going to go ahead and knock that down. And we're just going to use a grinder. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're just going to take the little corner off there. And then we'll come back and get that put in place. All right. I just used a flap wheel grinder. Took my time. Took a few minutes. Took a little bit off at a time. And you bevel it over, and then you can come over to the basket and line it up, and then look for the clearance between the basket and the teeth. And I do have clearance. All right, so that's about it. If there's any slight little bit that does just scuff this, it's not going to be much. At least not nearly as much as it would have been had I not trimmed the teeth down. Okay, so we dropped that gear into place, and just again as a note, if you're using any other basket besides a Hinson, if you're using a Weisco, Barnett, I believe even Tusk, they're actually designed with clearance for the gear. Hinson is the only one that you have to clearance the gear to clear their basket. Next we're going to do is put our shift detent in. So we're going to get set up to do that. Shift detent. Shoulder bolt goes in, washer is on this side. The spring goes over top. The washer actually sits inside of that. And then you're going to take that and get that threaded in. And that's in place. And as you snug that into place, you want to make sure you move this arm as you're tightening it so that that shouldered bolt goes into the detent. And then the washer's underneath it, and then the spring sits underneath that. So the next step is going to be to install our shift drum shifter. So you're going to see there's a little indent right up on the top here. So I'm just going to slide this right through and into that indent, and that'll allow me to pick this up like that. And then you'll be able to just set this right down in place and line the detent up here with the pin that's in the top of the shift drum. Okay, once that's in place, you'll then be able to install the bolt that locks it into place, and this gets torqued to 12 to 15 foot-pounds. Okay, once you have your shift drum shifter into place and you have this bolt put in and torqued, the next thing you want to do is you got to get your transmission in the right place. So it's you're gonna end up putting your screwdriver back in, lifting up on this shift arm detent and rotating this shift arm basically so that this scribe right here is lined up with the pin. Right now I'm in first gear, so if I come back and I torque this back just a little bit, there's neutral. Okay, so you want to get that timed up correctly, because then now we're going to end up putting all the shifter, we're going to be putting the ratcheting assembly in and then putting the shifter in itself. But you got to get that lined up. Okay, next step is putting the shifting mechanism in. Now I rolled my drum forward and put it into first gear, okay, just so that it's locked into gear. I'm going to lay this plate on here. Now if you lay this right on there, and then you push these two wings in, it, boom, drops right into place there. And then we're going to install these 3 bolts with a little Loctite. All right, so that's in place, and I just realized as I'm assembling this that this plate actually works as a bearing retainer. My bearing actually was sticking up slightly, very little, but as I was putting the plate in, I could see that the plate wasn't seating fully on the mounts. So I just took a brass drift and just tapped the edges, pushed in the rest of the way. Now everything sits nice and flush. It's just something to think about there. I put a little lube on there. Now we're going to put our shift shaft in. You want to make sure that you have that washer on there. So I'm going to put some lube on this, make sure the seal on the opposite side is good and lubed, and then we're going to go ahead and slide that into place. Okay, lubed up the shaft just so that it goes through the seal easily. We're going to slide that down in here. Slide it all the way through. You can feel it coming through the seal. There we go. And then we'll be setting that right down into place. Next is going to be our clutch basket. So we have this sleeve with new bearings, and I put some assembly lube on those. And that's going to drop onto here. Okay. Then we're going to take our clutch basket and we're going to drop this into place. Now, mind you, we're lining gears up here and here. So as you drop this down, it may not want to go down. You may have to, well, mine fit right in there. You might have to turn it a little bit. You might have to try and turn it just so that you can line up all the gears. Okay. Next is thrust washer. This comes into play here. I'm going to put a little lube on that just so that that's in there. Okay, next is going to be our inner hub. There we go. And then we have the inner washer. And then we have our locking tab. And then finally our nut, which I am going to put just a dab of Loctite on. And then we'll set that in place. Okay, once that's in place, I'm going to put our tool in here to hold the clutch. And then we are going to torque this nut to 40 to 47 foot-pounds, according to the manual. And right there is 45. And then we'll go ahead and just bend a couple of these tabs up to go ahead and prevent any, that nut from coming off. All right, so the clutch basket nut is torqued, and I bent up 2 of those tabs. So now that is in place. Next is going to be to put our lock nut for the crankshaft drive gear. Okay, important thing here on that lock bolt for this drive gear, there's a wave washer, and it's specifically says out on it. So that part will be facing out through our bolt. Going to put a little red Loctite in. And with that red Loctite, then we're going to go ahead and thread this in. And then this gets torqued to 29 to 36 foot-pounds. So again, I'm using my clutch tool there to lock the clutch basket in place. There we go. All right, so that's locked into place. And that completes the assembly of the right side of our motor for our TRX250R. I'm not going to install the clutch right now. I'm going to wait on that. I'm also not going to worry about putting the clutch lever and rod in yet. We're going to do that, all of that at the same time. But I did want to get this part of the motor all together. As you can see, everything is in there. You can see here, trying to line it up, pretty sure you can see how, there you go. You can see how shaving those teeth on that drive gear now clears that basket. Okay. Well, that completes it. Thank you very much for following along with us and watching. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. Like and subscribe if you like what we're doing here. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.